Hey everybody, welcome back to another breakdown. Meg and Greg here for episode 6 of Lovecraft Country.
This is Me In Daegu, and of course, if you haven't seen the episode yet, go back, watch it, come back here, we're getting into some serious spoilers.
Let's do it.
First, we have to start talking about the episode title, which comes from the Judy Garland film Meet Me in St. Louis, which we get a direct reference to right at the start of this. We have Ji-ah, who is our Korean friend who we've seen in flashbacks only. We get a ton of Ji-ah in this episode, but she kicks off watching this movie in a theater, and we can tell right off the bat that she is a huge fan. She even knows the dances, which I think was really cute.
It's so fun and cute when she's just humming the trolley song. That from there, I was like, oh, I love her. Who knew that she would be a actual monster? Even then, I still love her.
Right, yeah, no, she's adorable, which is funny because every time we've seen her in, kind of Tick's imagination version of her, she's been so scary. Like, she was fighting him the one time, she was an alien the other, and now she's just being like a show tunes loving nerd. Jamie Chung did such a good job in this episode. Like, she just brought this character that we had basically no information about to life immediately.
Now, like you said earlier about the title, this episode really just plays with the contrast of that idyllic fantasy that Ji-ah sees in the movie with Judy Garland, all the white people having the time of their lives, compared to the harsh, hellish reality that she's living in right now with the Korean War about to kick off.
Our next scene is Ji-ah back at home with her mom, and immediately you can kind of ping that things are weird. Her mom is making kimchi. It's, a pretty normal day by the looks of it, but we get the sense that, kind of just by their conversation that their relationship isn't traditional. And like her mom Ji-ah refers to her mother's husband, and it's very, very weird.
Yes. If you're just breezing through that, you would think, it's just a normal conversation. Her mom wants her to find a man, but even then it's men, plural.
Right.
It's little things you're like, wait, why did they say that? Like husband, she didn't say your father, she was my husband. So maybe you're thinking, okay, maybe she's adopted, maybe something else is going on. But at this time period, you're wondering, those don't add up. So something weird's happening here. And obviously, since Lovecraft's in the title, something weird's about to happen. And
one little side note I will say, because the majority of this episode was in Korean, which I thought was really cool. The way that the subtitles, like the native subtitles that exist just in the episode, they actually don't translate some of the like more idiosyncratic Korean words, which I thought was really great because a lot of them don't have like direct English comparisons. So you'll see in the subtitles as you're reading along, like Ji-ah will call her friends Uni, which is translated like UNNI, I think is what it's written in the subtitles, which is just a Korean word that it's not their name. It's not anything to do with, it's not a nickname or anything. It's a Korean honorific, I guess you would say, that is used between female friends. So it roughly translates to older sister, but not really. But we don't have that word in English. So they didn't bother trying to make up a word for it in English. They just wrote it out, which I appreciated. I thought that was a cool touch.
Now, the next day at school, Young-ja, her friend, is, talking to all the girls there in class about a guy she met. She won't be able to hang out with them that night as they go out on town.
Right. And I did love that. I mean, this episode, comparatively, especially next to the last week's episode, was a little bit light on body horror. No one was, ripping their skin off, but Ji-ah was, of course, training to be a nurse, so we get lots and lots of gore. In maybe the most mundane way possible, you could do gore in a show like this. I mean, not all the monster stuff notwithstanding. Lots and lots of medical gore. A couple parts that I had to look away from because it was really gross.
Now, it turns out that Young-ja met this man from speed dating. So it immediately cuts to Ji-ah trying to do the same thing, trying to attempt the exact same thing that her friend did. It doesn't work out. She even tries the exact same lines. It's just not happening. She's even trying, throwing out Judy Garland at the end, and she thinks she's finally got somebody, but even then, it turns out to be the same guy who's actually hanging out with her friend. Now, the speed dating thing isn't something that Lovecraft Country and the writers just threw in there out of nowhere. Actually, that existed all the way back in 1949.
So despite failing at the speed dating because she's a little bit awkward, like we've mentioned before, War. She does end up finding someone a little bit more traditionally, I would say. She goes to a bar, she gets all dolled up, catches a guy's eye. It's actually James Kyson, who played you. Like, you'll recognize him immediately when you see him. And I was like, oh my god, I had to look him up because I couldn't place him. But of course, he played Ando in Heroes. Hero's best friend, who was one of the like cuter, more fun parts of that relatively heavy show.
So, with that said, this made this next scene so frightening to see what happened to him.
Unfortunately, this adorable man from a fun, campy hero show goes home with the wrong lady. And we learn exactly what Gia's whole deal is, and it's gross and spooky.
It's awesome.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
It's a like I said, body horror isn't a huge emphasis in this episode. That's not incorrect, but there is still body horror here, and it is usually because Gia is a monster who kills men while they have sex with her, and it's putting it as delicately as I possibly can. Yeah. It turns out that Gia is not human. She is what's known as a Kumiho, which is a Korean kind of fox spirit. It's a nine-tailed fox thing in folklore, I guess you would say. If you're a fan of like anime, or if you've, kind of been in any of those East Asian, mythology circles, you would probably know a kitsune. It's a little bit more popular in pop culture. It's a fox spirit that can inhabit the form of a woman, that is typically like a trickster that can murder men or trick them into doing things for them, or any sort of, kind of villainous or chaotic evil, things that need to happen. This isn't necessarily, I would not say that this is a faithful representation of a Kumiho in folklore. This is wild. This is a very wild interpretation of what that is.
And the folklore also has it eating like the liver or the heart of a man, but here it takes the soul and then just explosion, just
pops him like a balloon. Why
Boom.
Not?
With that said, she also sees into their entire timeline, from beginning to end, or at least I think we have the interpretation here is like maybe things that he's already accomplished with his life in the past, but you may think that it also has something to do with something that he was going to do in the future.
Yeah, I kind of got, when you see, it's like a very rapid fire, like flash forward, flash back that she experiences when she's, sucking the soul out of this guy. I got the impression that she was seeing kind of further than where, obviously he's dying here, so he's not doing anything after this. But it seemed like, he's like climbing a mountain and everything. I don't know if he'd already done that. He seems kind of like a young guy. Maybe he has, but there has been a war going on for several years before this. So
last week they had a nod to climbing Mount Everest, and now this week we see this guy on top of a mountain screaming like, I made it all the way to the top. So I feel like maybe they're just like, it's leading to that again this week, where we saw things he's accomplished. I think he's a little bit younger. I think he's a little bit younger here compared to the man we see aged up in for his demise here. We then later in the episode though find out that the creature can see into the future as well. Next is 1950, and the Americans have landed. They are now in Korea, and at this point we can see them driving up in tanks, saying, "Don't worry, we're here. We bring you no harm," as they throw sheets of propaganda out their tank windows. Cool, that's great.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I immediately feel comforted the second I see people rolling down the street in giant tanks.
Yes.
Yeah, that's hope and love for sure. But interesting, I'm a huge history nerd, so I'm gonna soapbox for just a second about the Korean War, because it is known in, kind of historical circles as the Forgotten War for good reason, because we don't tend to, at least here in America, we don't tend to learn anything about it. The most popular version of the Korean War in pop culture, and the only thing that a lot of people are familiar with, is the TV show MASH. And beyond that, people don't tend to know what it is. So basically, the Korean War is a sort of offshoot of World War II. When the Japanese Empire fell, it had been occupying Korea for decades at that point, and they, had to pull back, and it left a bit of a power vacuum in Korea. And because there was already a ton of Cold War anxiety already happening at that point between the US and the Soviet Union, the idea that a communist regime could swoop in and fill that power vacuum was a huge threat. So immediately, there was basically no gap between the end of World War II and the start of the Korean War for a lot of American soldiers that did not just immediately return home. They pivoted right over to Korea and started a new war where they could preach, the virtues of capitalism against the oncoming communist threat. And this is also, McCarthyism is a big thing at this point, so it wasn't really I don't know how to to put this delicately, but there was really no questioning about whether or not communism was bad. It was just kind of a shoot on sight deal, and that's really why a lot of times we don't learn anything about it. We also see later in the episode, and this is actually completely historically accurate, the Korean War was one of the first modern wars to feature racially integrated combat units. So when you see Tick fighting alongside white men or Asian men, that's real. That is a thing that happened. Unfortunately, it doesn't really make the atrocities any better that happened in this war, but that's historically accurate at the very least.
Now, at this point, Jia's mother is telling her, bring home some Americans. That's got to be easy because, again, as she says, the very direct line is, they raped the very women they've sworn to protect. Yikes. So with that said, she's like, bring them on. And at this point, she only needs, apparently, 2 more souls. That's it. And then she's freed. Now, during the war in 1950, Jia and Young Ja are, just working as nurses at this point now. And with the racism's kicking in, as we see one of the soldiers trying to, try to fight him off, and they gotta, knock him out to help him. And then we see a shot where Young Ja is talking to a gentleman, and he slips her a note. Jia notices this. They speak about it that night later, and this is pretty much as we know what's going on here. And she tells Jia to shut her mouth, just to shut up, because this situation can get them all killed. As we see immediately right after that, as a communist, has been dragged through the city and is hung right in front of them and the people on the streets. To which Jia gets the idea, maybe it is time to find these next souls, as she sees American soldiers who are just watching the whole thing transpire without doing anything about it. She takes one of those gentlemen home. I guess to her mother's delight, there's only 1 soul left. She's so happy. This is the first smile she's given in the entire episode.
It really is. And this is where we get kind of an info dump from her mom, where Jia and her mom have this conversation about exactly what the deal is with kind of Jia's being a monster and whatnot. And she gives this whole expository dump about how apparently there was some sort of abuse happening in Jia's home when she was a child, and it involved her being assaulted by her, I guess you would say, her stepfather. We learned that Jia's mom was an unwed mother, which at this time, in the 1950s made her a bit of a pariah. And then there was abuse happening, at which point her mom, it sounds like she went to a shaman and then had the spirit kind of either summoned into or manifested into somehow her daughter, who was able to get revenge by murdering this horrible abusive husband. That sacrifice, however, there's some contention between Jia and her mom about whether or not this monster was put inside of her daughter, or this monster then overwrote her daughter, I guess is what I would say. Jia is not, her identity is confused at this point because she doesn't know if she is the monster, and then finishing out this kind of 100 souls. We did it. We got 100 souls. I'm going to be human again. If that will then erase Jia as she knows herself now, or if it will just, give her daughter back, which obviously that's what her mom wants. It's not probably not what Jia wants.
It's like the Star Trek ethical question of who am I? If you try to wipe over what was already there, and she doesn't want to lose herself or the person she is. She doesn't think She feels like one, she knows herself more than anybody here with this creature compared to who Jia really is at this point, and she feels like maybe she's gonna be a complete mind wipe. Does she start from the beginning all over again? And she doesn't want to find out. So at this point, she tells her mom, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to stop at 1.
Right. It makes me think of like the Haunted Mansion like tagline of like, we got 99 happy haunts, or it's 999 at the Haunted Mansion, but whatever. Here it's 99. There's room for one more, but we don't want it because we don't want to not. I mean, respect, honestly, like if I were a monster and didn't want to, get myself deleted to, become human again, like, yeah, man. But it seems like, 99 people dying is a lot. It's a high price to pay for that realization, but okay.
At some point, this realization should have kicked in a little bit sooner, maybe around like 12. Yeah. I don't know. And now Atticus enters the picture, and in a horrifying fashion, by the way, as soldiers are pulling the nurses off a truck as they've rounded them all up because there's a communist spy amongst the group. So it doesn't take long for them to start clipping people one by one, and it's a horrifying scene. And then Atticus shows up, and then his just nonchalantly comes over and point blank shoots one of the girls in front of Jia. Right before he can take anyone else out, Youngjia immediately tells him that she is indeed the spy, and she is. She was the one, or as we saw earlier, getting a note, and it looks like so at this point they drag her off, and this is the last that Jia sees of her. At least in this representation. She would see her later, sadly, through Atticus's eyes. But this is our introduction to Atticus, and from there, the next time they would meet would be, of course, in the hospital.
So our next scene with Atticus is, after a bombing or something, we don't actually see what happens to him, but we do see the result of it, and it's Atticus in the hospital with his leg bandaged up. His glasses are broken, which he is very upset about. Obviously, probably not just the fact that his glasses are broken. He's obviously been through some kind of horrifying stuff in and of itself. But Jia sees him kind of in this emotionally vulnerable moment, and so she immediately pings that this guy might be someone to know, or I don't know if she's thinking that maybe he's a good target at this point. It's conflicted. She's a little bit fraught at like right now. Which she finds him reading The Count of Monte Cristo, which is a thing that has come up time and time again in this whole season. Which, if you are like me and don't know anything about The Count of Monte Cristo because your high school education probably failed you in that sense of reading the classics, I don't know. I've never encountered this book, so I did Wikipedia it finally. If you are like me and have not experienced it, please go to the Wikipedia page and look at some of this crazy breakdown of the plot that includes an infographic of character relationships, including every character has betrayed one another. So one of them has a lesbian affair and runs off. It's amazing. That has nothing to do with Lovecraft Country, but please go look at this Wikipedia page.
Meg, please read the book. I want you to just please read the book and just give me a reconnaissance on everything you.
It's amazing.
Okay, thank you. When Jia tries to spoil the book to Tick, she's actually just retelling the Hollywood movie version of the story. It's kind of like every student in junior high who retells Frankenstein's monster who does the movie version.
Right. Yeah. Which, it's so funny and a few different levels, but I loved this moment as kind of like a weird meta commentary, especially in this episode of this show, because this episode has nothing to do with the novel version of Lovecraft Country. Like, Jia and this entire arc did not exist in the novel, and so then we have this story about a novel and a movie version which have totally different endings. And so Tick calls her out on it. He's like, oh, you've seen the movie, but you've never read the book. Which I think, that kind of little playful moment is enough of a foundation for them to become friends-ish. Friends at this moment. But it's a very little. It was a cute little self-aware moment for a show based on a novel that is doing something completely different than the novel.
Edmund and Mercedes don't end up together. So I see what they thought that change would make for a better movie.
Now, the episode has time to show them going on a date, as we see like this makeshift theater moment where Tick is presenting summer stock with Judy Garland and, of course, the great Gene Kelly.
As far as we know, she's still kind of holding firm about not wanting to take another soul. Like, she still doesn't want to. So this whole part was a little bit interesting and a little bit odd to me, that she still, she kind of wants to kill Tick because she's pissed at him justifiably because he, played a huge role in killing her friend, her best friend is what she says later in the episode. But she also doesn't want to kill him that way because that would put her at her quota. So it's a little bit of, you gotta thread that needle, I guess. But we do, the takeaway here is that she can at least sometimes control whether or not she gets all monstery.
Now, with that said, there's a moment in between where the two have like an on and off again relationship, but it's so quick. It's very fast. It's just like one scene, I hate you, get out. She's conflicted. And then the very next day, she goes to see Tick again, and now they're totally in love. Unfortunately, now at this point, the tails and tentacles are out. And it's working. It seems that it looks like Tick's in trouble, but Gia is able to stop the process halfway through, but she still sees Atticus's future.
Which is not a good future at all. And it includes some things that we, even now at episode 6, don't know about him. Like we see him kind of chained into a weird Frankenstein-y, like chair experiment-y. That's not a great way to describe it, but you know what I mean. We also see him being baptized, which in a Lovecraftian story is never a good sign.
No.
But basically, like, she comes out of this, kind of nightmare trance telling him that he's gonna die. Like, she sees him die. Of course, Tick at this point is a little bit more preoccupied with the fact that he just encountered a monster and saw it 100%. Like, he's panicking, which... This called into question the end of last week for me because he calls her. We see her in the end of episode 5. We see him call her up and is like, "What are you? You already you saw she's a monster."
I guess maybe. Okay, I'm trying to think if you're in his shoes and you're just getting your eyes, you're having sex, and then you're already not in the greatest set of mind if you're having sex. Like the mind is not there altogether.
Sure,
you're on one drive. So and now you're seeing tentacles, tails, trying to figure out what's going on. Your eyes are getting like sucked out, and then all of a sudden. It breaks, and then she just says, "Get out! You don't go back to America.
Sure.
Don't leave." So much is running through your head, and he just bounces. But at the same time, this makes more sense for how Tick handles magic now, and for everything that's happened and transpired back in America. I can see why Tick is just like
he's taking it way
I
more
believe
in
it.
stride. Yeah.
Yeah.
This isn't the actual case, but I would like to put on the table that also Tick is a huge nerd, and maybe he's asking, "What are you?" because he wants like the hardcore folklore answer. Like,
I would love that.
That
I
would
hope
be
she
so
explains
funny.
that to him.
Like he's actually, like he's a nerd. He's likes his sci-fi, and he wants to know, like, well, what type of alien are you? Which that's not true, but I think it would be cute.
Now, with that said, let's do a few more things here before we get into like some major questions we have going forward. One, in those flashbacks, you could see that the ones that we saw from Jihad she got from Tick is that one, we saw the abuse of his father. We saw moments with his mom. And in the future, we see him getting on the bus. We see him with a woman we haven't seen in the show yet. I don't know if we're going to see this person. Maybe that could have just been someone he slept with right when he got back into America, and then he headed to Chicago. That could be the case. I don't know yet. For the way this show's going, it could be anything. With that said, we also got a shot of a very concerned looking Letty. Who knows where that's going? And then on top of that, the final scene where he dies, that could also be, he could have sacrificed himself to save everyone for all we know. Just like we saw what happened in episode 2, where he thought he was going to die from going through that portal to open up the gates of Adam and Eve. But that did not happen. So obviously it seems like that's not going to be the case here, or he's just going to end up, he may die, but he may be revived. For all we know, Christina or someone could bring him right back. And again, it looks like I think they're setting you up for something you think you know what it is, but it's not really how it's going to go down. I wonder how Jiha is going to get to America in like a Game of Thrones kind of way, where she's on one side of the map and now she's here through magic, because we find out in the last few minutes of the episode that the shaman has told her, no, there is more bloodshed to come, and you're going to be a part of it some way, somehow. You're going to see a lot of people die. So with that said, it looks like we're getting more of Jia. So how does she get to America, or is Tick somehow going to end up in Korea? I doubt it.
It's really interesting because I also don't know what to look for in their relationship currently. Like, they did not leave each other on great terms. Obviously Tick, I don't think he went back and apologized to her after storming out of the room when she revealed herself to be a monster. Like, there was no real closure there. And that kind of answers the question we had back in, what was it, episode 1, where he calls Collect and then hangs up. He's like, I don't want to talk. So, obviously Tick is going to have some questions. Jia is probably going to have some questions. We don't know how long they've actually been apart. Is Jia still a monster? Did she finally get that 100th soul? There's a lot still on the table between these two. So something has to happen.
With that too, I love how on the nose now we can look back at some of the references they've made or connections between Jia, her creature, her form, and what we saw earlier. So episode 1, she's this red, now we can say drenched in blood alien coming down from a flying saucer. And then in episode 2, where she's a communist soldier attacking Tick, and this is mostly just to represent the death and the torture and death of her best friend that Tick was involved in.
Now, also interestingly, at the end of this episode, when they're speaking to the shaman, there is a voiceover. Like, Lovecraft Country loves to use historical voiceovers. This one is of Judy Garland, which, obviously she's been a huge part of this entire show, this entire episode. But, up until this point, we've only seen fun, cute show business Judy Garland. At this point, we get their tapes that exist that actually, I think popularly they've been called like Judy Garland Speaks. They're not like officially released in any sort of way yet, but at, kind of the end of her stardom, before she died, Judy Garland was going to write an autobiography. She obviously was not doing super great at that point and wasn't hitting deadlines with writing. So at that point, her manager or whoever was in charge of this book gave her a tape recorder and said, just dictate what you want to dictate into this tape recorder. We'll take it and transcribe it and write your book. The resulting tapes are very sad and very tragic, which, if you know anything about Judy Garland's life, is not surprising. But that's what these recordings are from.
I highly recommend watching Judy. It's a great movie. You're only going to want to watch it once. You're not going to come back to it probably after that, but it's heartbreaking, and they give you a really good picture into what happened to Judy Garland in her final years of life. With that said, this pretty much gives you everything Judy here. You see the rise in Wheaton and St. Louis. You see her star starting to fall in Summer Stock. And then finally, we get the voice recordings where she's completely now out. She knows her status doesn't work anymore, and she sees the harsh realities of America and the world itself. It's awesome. I thought the filmmakers did a great job here.
They've tried to kill me along the way, and by God, they won't.
Okay, that's it for us over here. Let us know what you guys thought of this episode in the comment section down below, and we will be back here next week for episode 7.
See ya.
Bye.